Please sit comfortably in the edge of a chair, a chair that is firm in the seat, that is not doesn't have a lot of cushioning, and also doesn't have wheels. And sit more or less in the border, in the edge of the chair, where you can feel your seat bones supported by the seat, and also where your legs are free. And take a moment there to see how you are sitting, to see how you're sitting there, and to feel your weight on your seat bones. And notice if there is one side where you feel a little more weight than the other, or if your body weight is more or less distributed in a similar way on both sides, if there's a balance in this distribution of yourself on the chair. So just notice how it is, and little by little begin to shift your weight from one ischium to the other, from one side of the pelvis to the other. Your leg stays more or less in the center. You can also try another way, which is bringing your head along with your weight to see how it is, especially to see how it is for your ribs. So notice what happens with your ribs when your head goes along with all the spine, and now change it, leave the head in the center, and notice what happens with your ribs. You can actually use your hands to feel your ribs on one side and the other, and to see how they open and they close like an accordion. So go from one side to the other, don't go to the extreme, but notice how in a very natural way, your shoulders, one shoulder goes down and another shoulder goes up a little bit with each movement. And it's like if you were walking, but in sitting. It's actually a very similar movement to walking when you do this. The way your hips and your shoulders coordinate is very similar to what you do when you are standing upright, moving. So leave that for a moment. And now lift only the right side. And see how it is to lift only the right side. Taking a little moment between each movement. So you don't do this automatically, like one after the other, but you do it and then you come back, rest for a moment, and go back at doing it. And now begin to include the opposite shoulder. The left shoulder goes up when the right hip goes up. In other words, your right shoulder goes towards your right hip. That's another way of saying it. And it's actually the same movement. And again, bring your attention to your ribs. What happens on the right side of your ribs? Can you see how they shorten, how they get closer together? The accordion closes on this side. And what happens in your ribs on the left side? Notice how they open, and there's more space between each rib. And now leave that, rest for a moment. And now, begin to do the same movement. Lift the right side of your pelvis, lift at the same time the left shoulder, and this time turn your head towards the left when you do this. First, only towards the left, a few times, combining the three movements. And then little by little, begin to bring your eyes and your head up towards the left. In other words, the back of your head goes towards your right shoulder. It's another way of saying it. So all your left side is expanding in this movement, you see? And include the eyes also. The eyes look up. And notice when you include the eyes in the movement, what happens to your head? What happens to your neck? What happens to all your right side and to all your left side? The right side gets more closed, but the left side is open completely when you include the eyes in this. So it's 4 movements into one. Pelvis, shoulder, head, and eyes together. And do it a few more times. And now rest. Breathe deeply and notice how is the weight on one side of your pelvis and how is it on the other side. Is there a change on how you perceive yourself sitting after these small movements on only one side? How is your sense of symmetry here? And now let's begin with the other side. Begin to lift the left side of the pelvis only. First, it's only the pelvis, bringing more weight to the right ischium. And now leave that, rest for a moment. And then in the next movement, you're going to include also the right shoulder going up. And now you begin to see how the ribs engage in this movement. And your head remain on your legs comfortably near your knees, so that you don't do a very big lifting of the shoulder. Remember that what is important is not the amount of movement. In this case, it's the coordination of the two movements. See if you can begin the two movements together and if you can finish them together. Now leave that for a moment. Rest there, breathe. And now include the head. The head goes to the right as the right shoulder lifts also towards the ear, let's say. And little by little, begin to bring the head a little more up towards the right. And begin to include the eyes when you go up. And notice what including the eyes does to the movement of your head. And remember to keep this movement small, slow, not automatic, but conscious. Because now you can see what happens in your ribs on the right side, how they open now. And the ribs in the left side that are closing. And now notice what your spine is doing. There's a very interesting movement of the spine in different dimensions, because on one side there is side bending, but also there is turning in the upper end of your spine. And leave that, rest for a moment there. And to finish, let's combine these two movements. Begin with your head in the center, down, and now bring the head up, down, head up, along with the shoulder, the hip, the eyes, and begin to dance like this. It's like you're drawing a smile with your head. Your head is making a curve, a letter U, or a smile, if you will. And notice what happens in the pelvis on each side of yourself when you do this. And begin to include also the sternum, the chest. Notice how it opens every time you go up to the right and to the left. So this is a coordinated movement where many different parts are combining into one single action. And leave that, come back to the center and rest for a moment. Breathe and notice how much air can come inside you now. We've been moving the ribs a lot, even if we didn't talk much, or if we didn't apparently on purpose do it, we moved them from the shoulders, from the hips, from the head. So notice how is your breathing now. And more interestingly, notice how is your weight on the chair now. How much of yourself is sitting on the chair? How clear is the sensation that you have of your own ischiums, of your own sitting bones. And also, where are your shoulders now? How is your neck? How easily can you turn to one side and to another side? And notice, if you turn your head, can you also include the shoulders? Can you also include the pelvis going to the front and to the back? And notice how it is to do this movement, including everything in this. Even the knees can participate a little bit, going back every time the one side of the pelvis lifts. And leave everything in the center, rest, and you can get up, walk, and feel how it is to coordinate your shoulders, your hips, and all yourself in a single action that is more complete, more unified, and less isolated, and with more unity in the way that you move for the rest of the day.